immune support. And I think you might be wondering, like, how does that, why are we talking about that if we're talking about the heart chakra? Well, the heart chakra doesn't just govern the heart, but it actually governs a lot of other organs in our thorax. And specifically, when we think about immunity, we think about respiratory, we think about the lungs and the thymus, both of which are very much governed by this chakra. And I think more than, even if we weren't in, this pandemic that we are in right now, definitely people are very concerned always about colds and flus because we're definitely headed towards that season. But also, again, the reality of our times is that we are in this respiratory pandemic. And so I wanted to talk about some of my favorite immune and respiratory herbs. So the first herb I'm going to talk about is mullein, which is also, the scientific name is Verbascum thaspis. And I chose this herb in particular because it's really good for the lungs. But one of the things I just wanted to touch on, we have this concept in herbal medicine. It's called the doctrine of signatures. And basically this concept is that parts of the plant look kind of like parts of the body and that they actually have like affinity. And mullein's a really cool herb because it actually has 3 parts of the body it has affinity for. So the flowering tops very much are for the mind. They have what we call a nervine property. So they're very calming, relaxing. The leaves kind of look like the lungs. So the leaves is the part of the plant that we utilize for lung health and breathing. And then finally the root. So the root of this plant is very, very beneficial for the urinary tract. So it can be very helpful when it comes to urinary tract infections. And so I'm going to talk basically about more. And so this actually could be like the perfect like chakra-less herb because you get like so many chakras in one herb, which is kind of amazing. So to talk a little bit about the leaf and why it's so good for respiration, specifically if you have a cold or a flu, is it's actually one, it helps to thin out mucus. It's what we call an expectorant. So basically it thins out the mucus and helps you expel it out. So really getting all that gunk out of the lungs, but it's also an anti-spasmotic. So why this herb can be so helpful, it's indicated for both like a wet, like that wet, thick cough, but also that chronic, that dry, like hacking cough where nothing's really coming out and you just really want to calm things down. So this is a great herb. Typically we either prescribe it as a tincture or a tea, and when used in combination with other herbs, it can be really good to have in your arsenal for cold and flu season. Okay, so Astragalus. So Astragalus membranaceous. This is a really great herb, both in prevention and then also if you do have a cold and flu, and it has a couple different properties. So Astragalus is both what we call an immune modulator. So so when we think about like if we're fighting off an infection, we really want to make sure that we have enough going on in our immune system to really fight off the infection. And what's amazing about Astragalus, it really actually is a big activator of pretty much most of the cells of our immune system. And recently I was at a conference and we talked a lot about COVID and mostly about what we know about COVID now, because now we have a good 9 months. And like the 2 really big factors in why some people, specifically we think about young people that don't have pre-existing conditions, why is it that some of them get so gravely ill from COVID? Well, the big 2 factors, it seems, are interferon. So those that have mutations in interferon that are not effectively producing. And basically interferon is a substance that tells our body's immune cells which cells are affected by a virus. So you definitely want to make sure that your interferon is really functioning properly. And then the other is our CD8 cells, which are part of the T cell line. And so dysfunction in both of these parts of our immune system are responsible for why some people that seemingly healthy, that don't have any pre-existing conditions, have fallen so gravely to COVID. So adding I mean, not, I'm going to say that like Astragalus can like cure COVID, but just from an immune standpoint alone, Astragalus is a really great herb to add. We utilize the root, and then also other properties. It is an adaptogen, so very good for times of stress. And again, we think about like somebody who's stressed out, they get sick. This is a really good herb, and it also has an affinity for kidney function, so it's very helpful for kidney function. And again, you can take this either preventatively or when you actually have a cold and flu. And it's like if you're thinking about like, what is it, like Jewish penicillin, chicken soup. It's actually, you can actually just add it to your chicken soup. So it's like it's very nutritious. So it's a really great herb to know about. And then the next, our next herb is pokeweed, Phytolacca americana. And I wanted to include this herb. It is what we call a lymphagogue. So whenever we're doing any kind of like herbal formulation, we never really think of one herb. We think of a multitude of herbs. And it's a good herb to know about because when you're looking for an herbal cold and flu immune supportive formula, looking for one that has poke root, Phytolacca, could be really beneficial because this is a lymphagogue that's specific for the respiratory system. And it's also part of a very famous naturopathic herbal formula called hemp formula, which stands for hydrastis, which is golden seal, echinacea, myrrh, and Phytolacca. And it's very good for any kind of like pharyngitis. We use the root. Typically, you would normally find it in a tincture preparation. And it's something that they usually use pretty low dosage because you really don't need a lot. And I usually only do 3 herbs, but like I can't help, I love this herb. This is turkey tail, Termes versicolor. So I use it a lot in my practice because of, I see so many women with HPV and cervical dysplasia. And so this is my always like absolute herb that I always go to. But I also want to include it again because I'm so excited about this new research regarding interferon and CD8 cells. And turkey tail in particular, even more so than even the Astragulus, has really been shown to really help improve CD8 function. And turkey tail, if you want to take it, one of the product lines I really like is Host Defense. And they do a lot of different like mushroom blends. Another one also I like is so like mushroom. But so other, I mean, I love turkey tail, but you can also do reishi, you could do shiitake. There's also really good research around maitake. So using that in with some other mushrooms can be really helpful for both prevention and if you actually have a cold or flu. Okay, and so I'm happy to take, I don't know if we have time for any questions or I kind of went through that, I think, relatively quickly.
Yeah, we've got time. Did you say Host Defense is the name of the brand? Okay, I put that in the chat.
High quality, because that's the most important thing when it comes to herbs. People, when somebody says that an herb doesn't work, I always question quality and potency. So for herbs really to work, they have to, and specifically that's another thing. I have like a couple of videos on cold and flu, but the big thing specifically if you're doing a herbal remedy in general when it comes to cold and flu, you want to start it as soon as possible and hit it really hard. And I mean, I don't want to brag about natural medicine, but really when it comes to cold and flus, herbs are going to provide you so much more than if you get like, Tylenol, cold and flu or something. All that's going to do is just take away some of your body ache and make you sleep, which I mean can be helpful, but these things actually help to support the immune system and fight off the virus or the bacteria.
That's amazing. This is incredibly helpful. Anybody have questions that they want to ask while you have Dr. Ivy here?
I do have a quick question. So those last 2 herbs that you mentioned, I actually haven't. Yeah, the turkey tail, which we actually refer to as pheasant tail here, where I'm in Missouri, and then the pokeweed. Yeah, I have those in my backyard. Totally. I was just wondering if there was like, I had no idea how I would start to even use those, but do you have any resources as far as like, I'm sure it takes some drying out or some kind of like processing. Do you have any resources for how you could take like the raw organic material and?
Well, what I would do, like, so again, it's always important whenever you're dealing with herbs, you have to know what part of the herb is useful. So in poke, I mean, it's kind of obvious with the mushroom because like, what else are you going to use? In this instance, it's definitely the root. Probably what I would do is if you get like, you could make your own tincture. So you can either do a fresh tincture or you can dry it first. Basically, you would want to get like an Everclear type of alcohol. Chop it up. It doesn't have to be too fine. And you put it in a glass jar. You definitely want to let that sit out for about at least a month or more, and then you would strain it.
Open, like.
No, I would close. I would do it like kind of like at a mason jar.
Okay.
Close. And then you would strain it. I mean, and then just a couple of things too about, as I mentioned before, this is what we call like a low dose herb. So if you did make a tincture, this is something that maybe you would just add a couple drops to a formula. Also, I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, another thing you could do, like if you have a friend who's lactating or is pregnant, you could make a salve with the poke root. So poke root is actually really good for mastitis, which is like the engorgement. But topically, so you could even take the root and do like kind of like a medicated oil. So similarly, like get like almond oil or any kind of oil or a jojoba oil, let that sit again, like at least a month. Or you could even, another thing you could make a dressing, meaning you could take, if you did make the tincture, you could saturate the cloth and do like a compress. You know, for the most part, I mean, it's definitely, what else are we doing right now? So I think that would be kind of like a fun thing to try. You know, one of the things we never know about, like, you know, the soil of where you are, or in these different factors, like what the actual potency would be, because it's not necessarily standardized. But specifically the mechanism of action of Phytolacca, I could see it being, you know, definitely something to try and adding it to a formula. In fact, actually, I did get the chance to make my own tinctures when I was in school, and even from fresh root even.
Cool. Okay, that sounds good. Yeah,
it would
thank
be
you.
disgusting tea. It probably tastes terrible, just to let
It
you know.
would probably, yeah, I would imagine it probably wouldn't taste really good, but I do like your other creative uses, like how to incorporate it. So that's very helpful.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And make sure you take down Dr. Ivy's website and information. So if you have more questions about it, you can connect. And I always send out an email to everybody who attends with the slides and the information, so that if more questions come up after tonight, you know, if something comes up for you, you know how to get in touch.
Absolutely.